name is Joshua Agnano. I'm a political science major here at Cal Poly Pomona. I'm here to describe to you guys why it's impractical for us to build Trump's wall. It's very expensive. I mean, we have previous walls built around, well, biggest example in 1961 in Berlin, the Great Berlin Wall. Well, it was like 96 miles, and it cost at the time around $25 million. With inflation now, that's about $200 million. And then in 2006, we had a much modern, more act called the Secure Defense Act, and it was enacted by the Bush administration, which built about 650 miles, about a third of the U.S.-Mexican border of fence, and it cost around $7 billion, which is a big price tag for us to pay. Well, that we paid for to build a fence. Now, how does that relate to Trump? He says Mexico's going to pay for it. Well, the Mexican president, Enrique Peña Nieto, he said straight to Trump that we will not pay for it. So, how's that going to affect anything? So let me describe how much it would cost to build Trump's wall. We have 1,900 miles of the U.S.-Mexican border that is, never going to change. And he estimated, in his estimate, would be about $10 to $12 billion. Okay, so what does that have to mean with anything? Well, there was a study done by the Huffington Post where they had described that his numbers were actually going to be wrong, as they went to various different experts in engineering, and they had described that it would be around $25 billion for us to pay for it. And that's not 10 to 12 that he says it's going to be. He said I'll build a great wall, nobody builds walls better than me. Believe me, I build it very inexpensive. That's not inexpensive at all. That's a big budget. They said it could be around 339 million cubic feet of concrete. And once again, Mexico will not pay for that. Why would they have to pay for something that technically they're not going to use? So what does that mean for us? Well, Trump's wall is the wall. It's going to devastate miles of land, including various habitats, including the Rio Grande in Texas. Rio Grande River, that's inhabited by many various different animals and all that. So it's going to cost a lot of money, including various natural habitats and private land. Private land held by U.S. citizens themselves, who unfortunately will have to pay to buy their land. So that's also another cost that they have to put on there, not just building the wall, which is already $25 billion. So what is the real cost of the wall? It's not even finished with the devastation of land. It's going to cost us in natural habitat, which in a previous one says, previous speech that was given, that we should stop destroying our natural habitat. And, well, there's good reason for that. I will not explain it. So the new question is, how will it be paid? If Mexico says they're not going to pay it, then how is it going to be paid? Trump, from his website, his own political website, he said he will enact the Patriot Act, Section 326, which will deem Mexican immigrants as potential terrorists in the United States of America. And what that would mean is that anyone trying to enter or leave the country would be charged anything from visas to sending money outside the country to even owning land on the country. They would be charged, and that would go straight to the United States. So that doesn't mean anything for you guys. If you guys are even legal citizens, but that doesn't say that they're going to pay for it. That says the people who live here or travel here to the United States are going to pay for it, and that's not the Mexican government, as he said. So then if they're not going to pay for it, because that's actually not going to be a lot of money, it'll probably be close to maybe a few $1 million, but not really too much to say, because there's a lot of people, but there's not really a real count, as I was doing a study. So that's going to be coming out of our pocket as taxpayers. Because if he wants to build his wall, then that's going to come out of taxpayer money, because that's how it's supposed to be, because, you know, it's our wall, not theirs. So, in conclusion, the wall is very expensive, impractical to build, destroy a lot of things. On top of that, Mexico won't pay for it, as Trump says, and it's going to affect us even worse. Thank you.
All right, Joshua, you present the claim like it is an informative topic. You're going to talk about building the wall and why it's an impractical thing to do. I think your claim needs to be a little bit more definitive and described as a declarative statement. The preview isn't really. There isn't really much of a preview. You just kind of mentioned some of the issues that are going to come up. Those also need to be phrased as claims. Now, I think at the end, when you're summarizing, it's clear what your arguments are, but they are still not phrased very much like they are arguments. They are phrased like it's a description of this process rather than an argument that says that the process is in fact impractical. You keep using a lot of questions to advance your argument instead of making declarative statements. For example, how much will it cost? That comes up, and say, who's going to be paying for it? The argument should be, it's going to cost more than we can afford, that the Mexicans will not be paying for it, or they will be unable to pay for it, or the tool that Trump wants to use to pay for it would be inadequate in order to gain enough money to pay for it. So you're dancing around the issues, but you're not really making them as very clear declaratives, and I think that makes the argument a little bit less convincing than it would otherwise be. I didn't see a very clear organizational structure, and like I said, frequently the problem is because there aren't declarative statements and just some questions moving us from one point to another, it feels a little bit fuzzy. I only heard a couple of source citations. I heard the Huffington Post being referred to, and I also heard a reference to Trump's website. I guess the Mexican president's opinion also would count as something, so maybe that's a third piece of information that we could apply as evidence. But on the cost issue, I think that's where you had the strongest information. The estimate, Trump's estimate is X. The Huffington Post estimate is double X. And the question about whether or not we have enough money for that is never discussed, whether or not it's practical to do that, how much. Is that in a single year? Can we spread it over a number of years? I don't know. I got to be honest with you. $25 billion is a lot to you and me, but as I've said on numerous occasions, that's basically what Congress spent this morning. So the idea that we should be worrying about it, I think, is a little bit problematic. You need to put it into a better context. I think a couple of things that might be missing from the argument is whether or not the wall would even work. That seems like it would be a clearer argument to make here. You just kind of focus on the practicality. You make an assertion that it's going to have a negative effect on the environment, and in particular the Rio Grande. I'm not exactly sure why pouring a concrete wall is going to have a negative effect on the environment, but that's the assertion that you make, and so I'm waiting for some evidence to show up and support that, and I don't get any. That the private property on the border, I think you need to have some evidence that documents that and shows that we're going to have to pay for it substantially more than we already have. I didn't get any factual data on those issues, and I thought that was a little bit problematic. You do a nice job speaking to the audience, and you are very naturalistic in the way you're making your presentation, but I do think that you need to quote things a little bit more directly, and you need to build declarative claims into the argument more. All right, thank you. Madeline.